Marriage is built on love, trust, and commitment. The husband, now 34, had always believed he had all three with his wife, Jessica, who is 32. They had been together for 8 years and married for 4, spending nearly a decade building a life together. To him, she was the perfect partner, beautiful, intelligent, and affectionate. She had always seemed like someone who valued their relationship as much as he did, and he never imagined she would betray him. Like any couple, they had their share of disagreements and rough patches, but nothing he ever thought was serious enough to break their bond. Every couple argues about small things, chores, responsibilities, time management, but he always assumed these were normal. He thought they had a solid relationship, one that could withstand challenges. When they exchanged vows, he believed those promises were sacred and that they both intended to uphold them no matter what life threw their way. Over the years, they had settled into a routine. They had their individual responsibilities, their habits, and their traditions. Date nights became less frequent, but that was part of life, wasn't it? People got busy with work, responsibilities piled up, and over time, passion sometimes faded into routine. He figured that was just a normal phase in any long-term relationship. He never felt a reason to doubt Jessica's loyalty or her love for him. If there had been issues, he assumed they were small, temporary, and fixable. However, looking back now, he wonders if he had been too complacent. Had he taken their marriage for granted? Had there been signs he should have noticed but ignored because he was too comfortable? These thoughts now haunt him as he struggles to reconcile the past with the painful reality he now faces. Jessica had always been social, but over the past year, she had started going out more frequently. He had noticed the changes, how she became more distant, how she sometimes hesitated when answering questions about her whereabouts, how she seemed lost in thought more often than before. But he had never once suspected that there was something deeper going on. He trusted her completely, never questioning her activities or her intentions. He never felt the need to check her phone, track her movements, or suspect any dishonesty. Their relationship had once been full of warmth and excitement. In the early days, they would spend hours talking, going on spontaneous trips, and making each other feel loved. But over time, those moments became less frequent. He recognizes now that he may not have put in as much effort as he should have. He didn't always prioritize their time together, sometimes letting work and other responsibilities take precedence. Still, he believed their love was strong enough to weather any challenges. Jessica had always reassured him of her love. She never gave any indication that she was unhappy, not in a way that made him believe their marriage was in jeopardy. That's what hurts the most now. If she had felt neglected or unappreciated, why didn't she say something sooner? Why did she turn to others instead of turning to him? He struggles with these questions, knowing that no matter how much he rewinds the past in his mind, he will never be able to change what has already happened. The woman he had trusted with his heart, his future, and his entire life had been unfaithful. And now, he is left trying to make sense of a reality he never imagined he would face. For now, he remains stuck between the past and the present, unable to move forward, unable to erase the memories of the life he thought they had built together. He wonders if he had been blind all along, or if Jessica had simply been living a double life without him ever noticing. Either way, nothing will ever be the same again. The discovery of Jessica's infidelity was not something the husband had ever anticipated. He had always trusted her completely, never feeling the need to check her phone, question her whereabouts, or suspect any wrongdoing. In his mind, they had a solid marriage, one built on mutual respect and love. But that illusion shattered in an instant when he stumbled upon the truth, by pure accident. It all began with something small. One evening, he was using Jessica's phone to look up a restaurant while his own phone was charging. That was when he saw a notification pop up, a message from an unknown number that simply read, "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." His heart stopped. It was the kind of message that could only mean one thing. At first, he tried to convince himself that he was misinterpreting it. Maybe it was a misunderstanding, a joke, or something innocent. But the uneasy feeling in his stomach wouldn't go away. His hands trembled as he opened the message thread. What he found changed everything. There were dozens of messages, flirtatious, intimate, and undeniably incriminating. Messages about secret meetups, inside jokes he wasn't a part of, and descriptions of moments that should have never existed. His pulse pounded in his ears as he scrolled further, realizing this wasn't just a one-time mistake. This had been happening for a while. The more he dug, the worse it got. He found messages not just with one man, but with 3 different men. Different conversations, different locations, different excuses she had used when she told him she was out with friends or at work late. His entire world began to spin. His breathing grew shallow as he tried to process what he was seeing. He felt sick, his stomach twisted in knots, his chest tight with betrayal. This wasn't some emotional fling or a one-time mistake. Jessica had been seeing these men behind his back for months, maybe even longer. And the worst part? She had never acted any differently around him. She had kissed him goodbye, told him she loved him, and lived their life as if everything was perfectly normal. At that moment, he felt like a fool. Had he really been this blind? Had he missed the signs for an entire year? All those times she had gone out late, all the moments she had been distant, had it all been because of them? His mind raced through memories, trying to piece together a timeline, trying to understand when things had started to fall apart. He wanted to believe that there was some logical explanation, some way that this wasn't as bad as it seemed. But deep down, he knew better. The evidence was right in front of him, in the messages she had sent and the words she had written. The realization hit him like a train. The woman he loved, the woman he had vowed to spend his life with, had been unfaithful multiple times with multiple men. For a long time, he just sat there, staring at the screen, unable to move. His heart pounded so loudly in his chest that he could hear it. The pain was unlike anything he had ever felt before, sharp, raw, and suffocating. His first instinct was to confront her immediately, to demand an explanation. But another part of him hesitated. What if she lied? What if she tried to deny it? What if she turned this around on him and made him question his own sanity? He placed the phone back where he found it, taking deep, shaky breaths. He needed to think. He needed to process. Rushing into an argument while he was drowning in emotions wouldn't help him get the truth he needed. That night, he barely slept. He lay in bed beside Jessica, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe peacefully, completely unaware that he knew. Every time he closed his eyes, the messages flashed in his mind, burning into his thoughts like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. The next morning, everything felt different. The way she smiled at him, the way she kissed his cheek before heading out, was any of it real? Had she been doing this all along while pretending to be his loving wife? The betrayal ran deep, cutting into his heart like a blade. One thing was clear, his marriage was no longer what he thought it was. He had uncovered a truth he never wanted to find, and now he had to decide what to do next. Would he confront her? Would he walk away? Or would he try to make sense of the unimaginable pain he was feeling? All he knew was that nothing in his life would ever be the same again. When the husband finally confronted Jessica, he expected her to deny everything, to try to cover it up, or to accuse him of invading her privacy. Instead, what he got was something else entirely: tears, apologies, and a justification he never saw coming. He had spent hours rehearsing in his mind how the conversation would go. He imagined her getting defensive, making excuses, or begging for forgiveness. But when he finally sat her down and told her what he had found, her reaction left him stunned. Jessica didn't try to deny it. She didn't make up lies or attempt to twist the truth. Instead, she broke down in tears, sobbing as if she was the one who had been betrayed. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said between gasping breaths. "I swear, I never wanted to hurt you." The husband felt frozen, torn between his anger and the emotional wreck in front of him. "Then why did you do it, Jessica? How could you do this to me, to us?" She wiped her tears, her hands trembling. "I don't know. I felt so lonely. I felt like I wasn't wanted anymore." Her words hit him like a punch to the gut. He had expected 1,000 different excuses, but this one felt different. It wasn't just an apology, it was an accusation. Jessica continued, her voice breaking. "You don't understand what it's like, to feel invisible in your own marriage. I didn't do this because I wanted to hurt you. I did it because I needed to feel something again. I needed to feel wanted." The husband stared at her, his emotions swirling in confusion. He had spent so long thinking their marriage was fine, maybe not perfect, but certainly not broken. And now, here she was, telling him that she had felt so neglected, so unloved, that she had turned to other men to fill that void. He felt an odd mix of emotions: anger, betrayal, sadness, even guilt. Was it true? Had he made her feel this way? Had he been so focused on work, on life, on everything else, that he had failed to see his wife slipping away? But then, just as quickly, another thought took over. Even if she had felt lonely, how did that justify what she had done? If she was feeling neglected, why hadn't she talked to him? Why hadn't she told him how she felt instead of sneaking around behind his back? "You're telling me," he said slowly, trying to keep his voice steady, "that instead of coming to me and telling me how you felt, you decided to sleep with 3 different men?" Jessica winced at his words, looking down at her hands. "I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't about them. It wasn't even about sex. It was about feeling something again. I swear, I never stopped loving you." The husband felt a bitter laugh rise in his throat. "You never stopped loving me? And yet, you gave yourself to them?" Jessica flinched but didn't argue. Instead, she said something that made his blood run cold. "I was still mentally loyal to you." He blinked. What? Jessica wiped her eyes, taking a deep breath. I know it sounds crazy, but, emotionally, I was still with you. My body was with them, but my heart was always yours. He stared at her in disbelief. Mentally loyal? What did that even mean? Was she actually trying to tell him that because she still loved him, her physical betrayal somehow didn't count? That it was excusable? He shook his head. Jessica, do you hear yourself right now? Do you really believe that makes it okay? She broke down crying again. No, I don't. I don't expect you to understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. But please believe me when I say I never stopped loving you. I was lost. The husband felt his chest tighten. He wanted to scream, to tell her that love wasn't just a word, that love wasn't something you betrayed so easily. But at the same time, a small part of him wanted to believe her. Because if he didn't believe her, if he accepted that she had simply chosen to betray him without any deeper reason, then what did that say about their entire marriage? Had it all been a lie? He sat there, silent, trying to process everything. Was she telling the truth? Had she truly felt so unloved that she had made the worst decision of their lives? Or was this just another excuse to justify the unforgivable? As Jessica sat in front of him, sobbing and begging for a chance to fix things, he realized something terrifying. No matter how much he wanted to understand her reasons, no matter how much she cried or explained herself, nothing could erase the fact that she had chosen this path. And the worst part? He wasn't sure if he could ever see her the same way again. After hearing Jessica's justification, the husband found himself in a mental war between anger, sadness, and self-doubt. He wanted to believe that the woman he had loved for so many years wasn't just some heartless cheater, that there had been something deeper behind her actions. But at the same time, he knew that no amount of loneliness could ever justify what she had done. Still, her words stuck with him. I felt unwanted. I was lonely. You weren't paying attention to me. At first, his instinct was to dismiss these statements as mere excuses, a way for her to shift the blame. But as much as he hated to admit it, there was truth to them. He wasn't a bad husband, but had he been a great one? Had he made her feel loved every day? Or had he just assumed that love was enough to keep them together without effort? He started looking back at their marriage, not just from his perspective but from hers. The gradual drift apart. He had always been a hardworking man. His job demanded a lot from him, and over the years, it became easy to justify staying late at work or bringing home unfinished tasks. He wasn't avoiding Jessica on purpose, he was just busy, caught up in the daily grind. At first, Jessica had been understanding. She never complained when he had to miss a dinner here and there or when he came home too tired to talk. She always reassured him, saying she knew how important his work was. But now, looking back, he could see the changes. There were nights when he would come home, exhausted, and she would be sitting on the couch, waiting for him. She would ask about his day, try to start conversations, but he would answer in short sentences, barely engaging. He told himself it was normal, that relationships change over time. Then there were the little things, the things he didn't do. He used to bring her coffee in the mornings just because. He used to send her random messages during the day to let her know he was thinking about her. He used to plan little date nights, even if it was just a movie at home with her favorite snacks. Somewhere along the way, he stopped. Not because he didn't love her, but because he had assumed she knew he did. But love isn't just a feeling. It's an action. It's the effort you put in every single day. Had he taken Jessica for granted? Had he made her feel invisible in her own marriage without realizing it? The missed warning signs. Looking back, there were so many moments that should have made him question things. Jessica had started going out more, dressing up in ways she hadn't before, taking extra time to do her hair and makeup even when she wasn't going anywhere special. She would leave the house without really saying where she was going, or if she did, her answers were vague. He had noticed it. He had even thought about asking her about it. But he never did. Why? Because deep down, he had trusted her. He never thought she would be the kind of person to betray him. That was his biggest mistake, not paying attention, not asking the hard questions, not realizing that something was wrong. Now, he was paying the price for his blind faith. Does this excuse her actions? Even though he could now see where he had fallen short in their marriage, one question still remained. Did any of this justify what she had done? The answer was simple. No. Feeling lonely, feeling unappreciated, these were things that happened in every relationship at some point. But cheating wasn't the answer. If she was unhappy, she could have talked to him. She could have told him how she was feeling. They could have worked through it together. Instead, she made the choice to lie. She made the choice to betray him 3 times with 3 different men. That was the part he couldn't ignore. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was a pattern. So, even though he could admit that he hadn't been the best husband he could have been, he also knew one thing. He didn't deserve this. He didn't deserve to be lied to. He didn't deserve to feel like a fool. He didn't deserve to have his heart shattered by the one person he trusted the most. Where does he go from here? Now that he had taken a hard look at himself, he was left with one terrifying question. What now? Could he forgive Jessica? Would he ever be able to trust her again, knowing that when things got hard, she was capable of doing this? Or was he setting himself up for more heartbreak if he stayed? He didn't know the answer yet. But he did know one thing: no matter what he decided, his marriage would never be the same again. Looking back, the husband realized that Jessica's affair didn't happen overnight. There were signs, small shifts in her behavior, subtle changes in their relationship, that he had either ignored or simply failed to recognize. At the time, they seemed insignificant, like natural changes that happen over time in any long-term relationship. But now, knowing what he knew, he could see the truth. Jessica had been pulling away from him long before he ever discovered the affair. Now, he couldn't help but wonder, if he had noticed these signs earlier, would things have turned out differently? Would they have been able to fix their marriage before it got to this point? 1. Emotional distance and lack of affection. One of the first major signs was the emotional distance that had crept into their relationship. In the early years of their marriage, Jessica had been affectionate. She would greet him with a warm hug when he got home, kiss him goodnight, and cuddle up next to him while they watched movies. But at some point, that stopped. It was gradual, so much so that he barely noticed it happening. Instead of greeting him with excitement, she barely looked up from her phone when he walked in the door. Instead of initiating physical intimacy, she made excuses: she was too tired, had a headache, or just wasn't in the mood. At first, he accepted it. He figured she was just stressed or going through a phase. But now, he saw it for what it really was: she had already started detaching from him emotionally. Maybe she didn't even realize it at the time. Maybe she thought she still loved him, that she was just dealing with personal struggles. But deep down, something had shifted. And he had failed to see it for what it was. 2. Increased time spent away from home. Jessica had always been social, but she was never the type to go out constantly. They had a routine: weekends were for them, for relaxing together, for being a couple. But then, things changed. She started going out more frequently, often with vague explanations. Just a girls' night, she would say, or I'm grabbing drinks with some friends. At first, he didn't think much of it. But then it became a regular occurrence. She would come home late, sometimes after midnight, sometimes even later. When he asked her who she was with, her answers were always generic: just some people from work, or you wouldn't know them. He had noticed it, but he never pressed her for more details. Why? Because he trusted her. Because he believed that if there was something wrong, she would tell him. But she never did. And he never pushed. That was his mistake. 3. Unexplained changes in appearance. Jessica had always been beautiful. But at some point, she had started putting extra effort into her appearance, way more than usual. She bought new clothes, started wearing lingerie he had never seen before, but never for him, and took extra time getting ready before going out. Again, he had noticed, but he brushed it off. He assumed she just wanted to feel good about herself. After all, there was nothing wrong with a woman wanting to look attractive, right? But now, with everything he knew, he couldn't help but see it differently. Who had she been dressing up for? Who had she been trying to impress? It clearly wasn't him. 4. Guarded behavior with her phone. This was perhaps the most obvious sign, and the one he had completely ignored. Jessica had never been secretive with her phone before. In fact, they used to be completely open about it. If she needed to use his phone to check something, she would. If he needed hers, she didn't hesitate to hand it over. But over time, that changed. She started keeping her phone on silent all the time. She would tilt the screen away from him when she was texting. She would get sudden calls and step out of the room to answer them. And if he ever casually reached for her phone, even just to check the time, she would snatch it back immediately. Even then, he had refused to believe something was wrong. Instead, he told himself, maybe she just wants more privacy. Maybe she's stressed. Maybe I'm overthinking things. He trusted her too much to even consider the possibility that she might be hiding something. Now, he knew better. 5. Changes in intimacy. Their sex life had never been perfect, but it had always been theirs. It was consistent, intimate, and real, until it wasn't. At first, he noticed she was less interested. Then, it became almost non-existent. She stopped initiating. When he did, she either declined or just went through the motions, making it feel more like an obligation than something she actually wanted. He had asked her about it once, but she just told him she was tired and stressed. And he believed her. But now, he had to wonder, was she tired? Or was she getting that intimacy somewhere else? 6. The sudden need for space. Perhaps the most painful sign was that, towards the end, Jessica just seemed distant. She wasn't as engaged in conversations. She wasn't as excited to spend time together. Even when they were in the same room, it felt like she was somewhere else entirely. At one point, he had even asked her, "Are you happy?" She had smiled and said, "Of course." And like a fool, he had believed her. What could he have done differently? As he reflected on all these signs, one painful thought kept haunting him. Could he have stopped this from happening? If he had noticed the warning signs earlier? If he had confronted her when things started to feel off? If he had made more effort to keep their marriage strong? Would she still have cheated? Or had she already made up her mind long before he ever had a chance? The truth was, he would never know. But one thing was clear, he had missed all the signs, and now he was left to deal with the consequences. One detail that stood out like a flashing red light was the fact that all 3 men Jessica had cheated with were at least 10 years older than her. At first, this seemed like just an odd coincidence, but the more the husband thought about it, the more it unsettled him. Was this just a fluke, or was there something deeper behind her attraction to older men? The question gnawed at him. He had never thought of Jessica as someone who had a specific type, but this pattern was undeniable. And now, in the wake of her betrayal, he couldn't help but wonder, had she been craving something from these men that he couldn't provide? What did these older men offer that he didn't? The thought tormented him. He started overanalyzing himself, comparing what he had to offer with what these men might have given her. Maturity and experience. Older men often have more life experience, financial stability, and emotional maturity. Did she see him as too immature? Had she grown tired of his habits, of their familiar dynamic, and sought out someone who made her feel different? A sense of power and confidence. Maybe these men had a type of confidence that he lacked. Older men are often more self-assured, more decisive. Did she feel like they had a stronger sense of control in their lives? A different kind of attention. Maybe they knew exactly what to say to make her feel special. Maybe they had flattered her in ways he never did. Had he taken her for granted while these men made her feel new, exciting, desired? The possibilities made him sick. Had she always had a preference for older men? Another troubling thought crept into his mind. Was this something new, or had it always been there? Looking back, Jessica had never openly expressed a preference for older men. But there had been moments, tiny red flags that he had ignored. The way she admired older male celebrities, the way she spoke about them with more excitement than younger actors. The time she casually mentioned that her friend was dating an older guy and said, "Honestly, I get it." That one time, early in their relationship, when she jokingly said, "Guys your age are still figuring things out. Older men have their lives together." At the time, he hadn't thought much of it. But now? Now it felt like a clue he had missed. Had she settled for him because he was the right age, the right person at the time, but deep down, she had always been drawn to older men? Had she been fighting that attraction their entire marriage until, finally, she gave in? The thought was unbearable. Was it about the men, or about her? At one point, he had to stop himself and ask, was this about the men at all, or was it about something inside Jessica? Maybe it wasn't that she was specifically attracted to older men, but rather, she was drawn to what they represented. Heavy checkmark, a new experience. Heavy checkmark, an escape from her routine. Heavy checkmark, a way to feel young and desired again. Maybe these men didn't really matter. Maybe if they had been younger but had the same confidence and attention, she still would have cheated. Or maybe he was just telling himself that to make it hurt less. Did she ever see him as enough? This was the hardest question of all. If she had been capable of betraying him with 3 older men, did that mean she had never truly been satisfied with him? Had she always secretly wanted someone else, someone more mature, someone who wasn't him? Or had she loved him once, but over time, the excitement faded, and instead of working on their marriage, she chased after something new? He had no way of knowing. He could ask her, but would he ever really believe her answer? What did this mean for their future? Now that he had seen this pattern, he couldn't unsee it. Even if he decided to stay with her, how could he ever feel secure again? Would he always wonder if she was secretly still craving the attention of an older man? Would he constantly be looking over his shoulder, wondering if the next time she was out late, she was with someone who had more life experience than him? Would he always feel like he wasn't enough for her? The worst part was that he knew deep down, even if she promised to never cheat again, he would never be able to fully shake this thought. And that made the idea of staying with her even harder to imagine. Final thought, the damage was done. It wasn't just about the cheating anymore. It wasn't just about the lies or the betrayal. It was the doubt. The realization that he might never truly know what Jessica really wanted, or if she would always be tempted by something else. Even if she stayed, even if she swore she was done with older men, how could he ever be sure? And how could he live like that? One of the hardest parts of this entire ordeal was that he hadn't told anyone. Not his friends. Not his family. Not even a close coworker who might have offered some outside perspective. Despite everything Jessica had done, despite the betrayal, the lies, and the sheer emotional wreckage she had caused, he found himself protecting her. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was because he still loved her. Maybe it was because he couldn't bear the thought of people seeing her differently. Or maybe, deep down, he was ashamed of being the man whose wife had cheated, ashamed of looking like a fool in front of everyone he knew. Either way, he had kept it all inside, and it was slowly destroying him. Why did he feel the need to protect her? It would have been so easy to expose her. To tell their friends and family, to let them see who she really was. And yet, every time he thought about doing it, something inside him stopped him. He didn't want to make her look bad. Despite everything, Jessica was still his wife. He had loved her for years, built a life with her. Even though she had betrayed him, he didn't want to be the one to tear her down in front of others. He didn't want pity. If he told people, they would look at him differently. They would see him as the poor guy whose wife cheated on him, and that was a label he didn't want to carry. He feared judgment. What if people blamed him? What if they said, well, maybe if you had been a better husband, she wouldn't have strayed? Even though he knew cheating was never justified, he wasn't sure he could handle the whispers and opinions of others. He still had hope. A small part of him wanted to forgive her. And if he told people now, they would never forget it. If they ended up staying together, he knew his friends and family would never look at Jessica the same way again. So, for now, he chose silence. But silence came at a cost. The weight of carrying it alone. Keeping the truth to himself felt like carrying a boulder on his chest every single day. At work, he tried to stay focused, but his mind kept drifting. Every time his phone buzzed, he had a flash of paranoia. Was it Jessica texting another man? Was she still lying to him? When he spent time with friends, he forced himself to smile, pretending everything was fine. But inside, all he wanted to do was scream. Worst of all were the moments with his family. His parents had always adored Jessica. They constantly talked about how lucky he was to have found such a loving, wonderful wife. And every time they said it, he felt sick. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know that the woman they admired had betrayed their son in the worst way possible. He wanted to tell them. He wanted to share the pain, to have someone else carry a piece of the weight. But he couldn't. Because once he said it out loud, there would be no taking it back. Living two different lives. At home, he was in hell. He was drowning in anger, doubt, and heartbreak. Every interaction with Jessica was forced, every conversation filled with tension. Even though she had apologized and begged for forgiveness, he didn't know if he could believe a single word she said anymore. But outside their home, he was playing a role. To the world, he was still the same husband he had always been. He laughed at jokes, talked about weekend plans, and pretended like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. The act was exhausting. And it was breaking him. Should he finally tell someone? Every day, he debated whether or not to finally break his silence. Would it make things easier if he told someone? Would it help him process the pain if he had someone else to talk to? Or would it just complicate everything even more? If he told his friends, they would hate Jessica instantly. They would tell him to leave her, no hesitation. But what if he wasn't ready to make that decision? Would they think less of him if he chose to stay? If he told his parents, it would devastate them. His mother had always believed in marriage, in working through problems no matter what. Would she tell him to forgive Jessica? Or would she be heartbroken that the daughter-in-law she loved so much had done this to her son? He didn't know. And that was the problem. He had never felt so alone in his entire life. The fear of what comes next. The hardest part about telling someone wasn't just admitting what had happened, it was the fact that once he spoke the words out loud, he would have to face the truth. Right now, as long as he kept it inside, he could still pretend he had time. Time to decide. Time to figure things out. Time to process everything on his own. But if he told someone, they would expect him to do something about it. They would ask, "Are you going to leave her? Are you going to try to work things out? How can you ever trust her again?" And he didn't have the answers yet. The breaking point. He knew he couldn't keep this inside forever. The weight of it was too much to bear alone. But he wasn't sure who to turn to. He needed someone who wouldn't judge him, someone who wouldn't push him in one direction or another. Someone who would just listen. The only question was, who? And more importantly, was he finally ready to say the words out loud? What would you do if the person you trusted most shattered your heart? After 8 years together, 4 of them as husband and wife, he thought their love was strong, until he discovered the truth. Jessica had been unfaithful. Not just once, but with 3 different men, each older, each offering something he never knew she craved. Now, he's drowning in doubt. She swears she was mentally loyal, But can love survive a betrayal this deep? Can trust ever be rebuilt? Or is he simply setting himself up for more heartache? Stay and forgive? Or walk away forever? One choice will define the rest of his life.